am the chosen one. Be brave, Professor. Be brave like my mother.
How do you feel?
Excellent. Really excellent.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We are covering Chapter 22, After the Burial. Jenn is with us today.
Hey guys.
I think you said this is one of your favorite chapters?
Yes, this is one of my favorite chapters and my favorite book, so it feels very fitting.
Very, very fitting. It's a very interesting chapter. We get a couple of quick hits that we'll get to here soon, and then we get a lot of Hagrid in this chapter. One of his dearest and oldest friends has unfortunately passed away, and that's what the burial is about at the chapter title. And we kind of get some fallout in and around that. So, some of the quick hits that we have, Harry is still failing at getting the memory from Slughorn, and he's still failing on catching Draco Malfoy doing anything actually illegal or wrong as the summer is approaching. So we're getting fairly on in the year, so obviously that stress is building for him to accomplish his homework that Albus set to him. Ron is also having issues doing homework because he's busy hiding from Lavender.
Yep.
Anytime a girl comes across his path, anytime he hears a female voice, anytime he senses hair brush past him, he gets very on edge and then hides behind Hermione, who seems very exasperated by the whole thing at this point, which I don't blame her.
It's a shame that there's no discussion of if Lavender wore a specific type of like perfume. I feel like that could help him in these situations.
All the senses. Just all the senses.
Yep.
I get he's a teenage boy that doesn't, and we've talked about the communication part of this, but my goodness, why can't they just like talk about it and just end it?
I don't understand. I mean, I know that for Ron, I think he knows that Lavender is going to have a very negative reaction to ending it, but this is one of those things where it's like, just rip the Band-Aid off, man. Like, you're making yourself miserable, you're making Lavender miserable. Like, I get that you're scared of the reaction, but it's certainly not the way to handle this long term. Like, it's a very short-sighted approach to this.
Oh, for sure. I feel like he's in the mode of, if I do nothing, it will just end naturally and I won't have to actually have a conversation.
That's not a guarantee. Also, I feel like in some situations, it's worse for both people to do that, especially because if he's just ghosting her, essentially, that's still going to elicit a reaction from her. I don't think that she's going to just, one day wake up and be like, well, I guess he doesn't want to be with me.
Well, okay, so that's where I was going with this. Do you think Lavender in this book and in the movie gets a bad rap in this whole relationship?
100%.
Because I feel like people look on her more negatively than is actually deserved.
So I think that's really interesting, and I think we maybe touched briefly on this in one of the previous chapters, but this is one of the benefits of rereading this series, a handful of times and over different periods of like my life, because the first couple of times I read this book, I was very anti-Lavender. I wasn't like pro-Ron. I think I was more neutral towards Ron with it. Like, I knew that he was handling it poorly, but she's just made to be so overbearing, and she's just, kind of clingy, and you're meant to kind of empathize with why Ron is avoiding her. And the older that I've gotten and the more that I've done a lot of introspection, and I've had different kinds of relationships with people, and it's very much like I'm honestly Team Lavender. Like, she's very clear about what she wants out of a relationship. She's passionate about Ron. I feel like this kind of plays into, in maybe like a little bit of a backwards way, the stereotypes of like, you're supposed to play it cool, and she's not playing it cool. So like, she's clingy and she's overbearing and whatever, but like, maybe there's another Hogwarts student that could go at a relationship with Lavender with an equal amount of passion, and then she's found someone more suited to her. But I think the way that Ron treats her is very dismissive of her and really just disregarding her feelings, and I think it's very ignorant of him. So definitely over the years, I've shifted from being like neutral Ron, anti-Lavender to like pro-Lavender, anti-Ron.
Fair enough.
In this book.
You got to this book later in life, correct?
I did.
I would be interested to see how high school Jenn viewed this.
It would have been even worse.
More anti-Lavender early on.
Absolutely.
Because I was always wondering like what the female perspective would be. I would assume most female readers would read this maybe from the perspective of Lavender in this situation.
See, I always read it, I related more towards Hermione. Not, like, and I don't mean that in necessarily an overall sense, but I mean that specifically in this. I feel like there were so many times in my life that I had a crush on a guy who was in a relationship. So it was a lot easier for me to put myself in Hermione's shoes of being like, oh my God, he's with her and she's annoying him and like, why can't, along the lines of like Taylor Swift's, like you belong with me kind of theme. As younger, it was a lot easier to put myself in that kind of mentality. And then it wasn't until I got a lot older and, towards the end of college maybe and past college where I started to try to look at it from different perspectives. And then I also kind of realized that this is maybe too broad of a topic for this chapter, but more so about like women need to support women.
Okay.
And I feel like there is a little bit of like I don't like the undertones that it frames Lavender and like Lavender is bad and
it's interesting because a woman wrote this book.
And she has some opinions that are
that is fair.
Questionable. So
very fair.
I think this is kind of another one of those where it's like there's maybe a little bit of like when I ask, JK if she's just not had very fulfilling female friendships or something because there's nothing actually objectively wrong with Lavender in these books.
I completely agree with you. I think Ron is 9 times out of 10 because there's some stuff Lavender does and I'm like, ooh, that's a little cringy. But like 8.5, 9 times out of 10, it's usually Ron kind of being a little on the wrong side of things.
Yeah.
So it's and that's coming from a guy's perspective. I'm like, that's probably not the best way to go about it.
And you can certainly make the argument too that Lavender, maybe is being, kind of clingy towards him, kind of overbearing because maybe she has like deeper seated insecurities that maybe she's not addressing or dealing with properly. So I'm not trying to paint Lavender as like, 100% correct because, she's not. There's probably work that she could do with this.
Presumably this is their first real relationship.
Right.
So they're gonna make mistakes.
Oh yeah.
They're gonna handle things poorly that they'll look back on in 10 years and be like, oh yeah, that was not a good look for me.
Yeah. I think we've all had those.
I would agree.
Moments,
absolutely.
For sure. So it is. And at least it does feel relatable. I don't like It feels like there may be some not great undertones.
So what you're saying is when Lavender finds her future husband, assuming it's not Ron here and they have some miraculous recovery, she will not send a my sweetheart gold necklace fairly early on in the relationship? No?
I hope that she does. Like, yeah? I hope if that is truly Lavender and that's not coming from like a place of insecurity, but that's how she expresses that she cares for someone, I hope that she finds someone that she can do that with and who responds in a similar manner to her.
Fair enough. So we get some news on some apparition tests as well. They were very, very stressed beforehand, anticipating the exam. And we do find a little bit later in the chapter that Hermione passed, presumably flawlessly.
Shocking.
And Ron, through the testimony of Hermione, barely failed. And it was kind of unfortunate and a little bit too nitpicky, which if you're getting Hermione saying a test was nitpicky, she's really trying to lay on the empathetic tones of like, oh, Ron, it really wasn't you, it was the exam.
She is really, like, she's laying it on.
She's laying it on a little thick, yeah. Ron barely failed by leaving one half of an eyebrow behind.
That's rough.
That's a mild form of splinching, I would assume.
Yeah, I think technically that counts.
I mean,
so question though, so he left half an eyebrow behind. Did they like restore it, or is he just like rocking one half eyebrow now?
It depends on how salty the examiner was,
fair.
probably. If Ron was giving me a whole bunch of flack, I'd be like, okay, fine, just deal with it. I don't know if they had the heads of house proctoring this, like just helping out. Mm-hmm. Snape wouldn't do anything.
Oh, of course not.
Deal with it.
No. Snape, you're lucky if Snape doesn't take the other half.
We get the kind of fun half-heartedness of the apparition stuff and Ron and Lavender. I mean, we've delved into the more serious sides of it, but it does add a little bit more of a humorous thing. Like, oh, Ron is dodging Lav. Okay, great. We do get a little bit of a serious undertone, though, because I feel like out of nowhere in the chapter, too. Like, it is a very, lighthearted moment, and then it just takes a turn.
Yeah.
When they mentioned that the Montgomery sisters, and you know how much, if you listen to this podcast, you know how much I love to mention one-off names. The Montgomery sisters. They exist. Yep. Good for them.
This was one of those parts where I was reading this, and I'm like, am I supposed to know who these people are?
Yeah. I'm like, this is interesting.
Yeah.
But their story is very, very sad. The Montgomery sisters have a 5-year-old little brother who was attacked by a werewolf recently. And they took him to St. Mungo's, and he passed away. He died at St. Mungo's. To which they were all surprised, and they're like, well, that's odd. Werewolves don't usually attack to kill. They usually attack to multiply. They believe it might have been Fenrir Greyback who did the actual killing, and they base it on the mother was unwilling to help Death Eaters, and that's why they attacked a 5-year-old, which is abhorrent, to say the least.
Oh, yeah.
You're not doing a whole lot to, not that they're trying, obviously. You're not doing a whole lot to push werewolf rights
Yeah.
by attacking and killing.
No.
And obviously, from what we've heard from Lupin, there's more and more of a growing vibe, I guess, amongst the werewolves to establish themselves in a more aggressive way to get what they feel is equality.
Yeah.
Under a potential Voldy leadership. So, yeah, it just just took a dark turn, kind of out of nowhere.
This is actually one of the things I really like about the book.
This specific, a 5-year-old getting attacked by a werewolf?
No, not the specific 5-year-old getting attacked by a werewolf. Who wants that? No, I like that there's lighthearted teen drama followed by high stakes.
I think you get that even in Prisoner of Azkaban and Goblet of Fire and Order of the Phoenix, where obviously the stakes are being progressively raised.
Yeah.
This book lays them out for you.
Yeah.
From front to back. It's not just we're in the later third of this book. We're almost at the end. It's not just coming at the end.
No.
It's laid out for you from the very beginning.
I think it's interesting, and I think it's just a really good juxtaposition of these are teenagers. These are the people who have to more or less, help fight this war,
mm-hmm.
and they are just kids, and they have their own teenage drama.
I forget if it's Ron, but I think it was Ron who said, I can't even keep track of all of the news surrounding Hogwarts students that ends up in the paper because it's happening so frequently.
Yeah.
They're not only witnessing it and seeing it, they're getting jaded to it already.
Yeah.
Which is that's even a more scarier thought, that it's happening so frequently and so often that you're getting numbed to it.
Yeah.
That's horrifying.
Yes, absolutely.
So what's going on outside of Hogwarts and what's happening in between the words and the pages that we're reading is that outside world is it's a war zone. Stuff is really going on and people are very much aware of it.
Yep.
But anyway, we will for right now stick within the walls of Hogwarts, or at least the grounds, because we are going to escape the walls here in a second. But Harry gets delivered a letter and he's dreading it because he thinks it's another letter summoning him to Albus's office for lessons that won't matter because he hasn't completed his homework. But instead, it's a letter from Hagrid. And it basically just says Aragog has passed, Aragog has died, and he wants the three of them to go to the burial, go to the funeral. And there's two things here about this letter from Hagrid. One, the graphic. I think the graphic is really cool that they give in the book. They show a tear-stained letter, and it's fairly realistic. I like that they do it in Hagrid's handwriting.
Yeah.
which
No, I
really,
think
really like.
that's really sweet. I like the splotches on it. That's definitely missing from the digital copy that I have.
The other thing I wanted to address is Harry wants to go. Harry's like, I feel like I should. Like, in my heart, in my soul, in my gut, I feel like I should go to this thing. He's clearly distraught about it. I think he says in the letter that Hagrid feels like he can't face this alone.
Yeah.
So Harry, being Harry, is like, I think we should go.
That's actually really sweet of him.
It is. I think, as much as we get on Harry for a multitude of things on this podcast, deservedly so. I think that is one of his better attributes, is he is a ride or die.
Yes.
Like, if you are with him, and he will literally go to war with you. The others, however, want to leave Hagrid hanging. They're like, I'm not really sure this is smart. Hermione's like, is this really worth risking a detention over? Throwing it back all the way to book 1. Like, I don't know that this is worth the risk. And Ron is like, I'm sorry, there's a large spider, even if it's dead, I want nothing to do with it. And I'm left thinking, poor Hagrid?
Poor Hagrid is right.
And not just this either. I think Hagrid gets a poor deal throughout this book. Towards the beginning, they don't even want to take his class, which I think was not right either.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Okay, the competing thing is Hagrid's not the greatest teacher, which I will admit. He's not the greatest.
Right.
He needs maybe a few more years of experience to really hone in that he's an expert, a knowledgeable expert, but not good at communicating that in a safe way.
No.
They obviously have a connection with Hagrid that is beyond just teacher and pupil, number one. Number two, I think it's actually an interesting class, and this might be some of my personal bias coming through.
That's a bit of your
fair.
own bias.
I think it's an interesting class that has some worthwhile attributes to it, especially if you're Harry Potter and your ambition is to be an Auror. You might come across some beasts that you might have to figure out, like, hey, how do I deal with this thing?
I don't disagree with that take that it might be helpful if he wants to be an Auror, but I think it's probably just not worth the headache of, like, that class sounded genuinely stressful. Like, if you have a teacher who doesn't know what they're doing or can't present things in a positive way, even if it's your favorite subject, it's still going to stress you out, and it's still not going to be a pleasant experience, and you're still not going to want to have to deal with it or learn anything from it, or it's... So I for that reason, I think it was better for them to not take it, but...
It's brutal on Hagrid.
Some people just...
Hagrid's been a non-factor in this book.
He is a sweet, sweet man. Not everyone who is sweet is qualified to be a teacher.
That's fair. From a grade point of view, I mean, it's an easy A, right? I mean, it's an easy grade.
Is it though? Because you're chasing
Hagrid's not
around.
Gonna fail them.
No, but I don't know that
the
I'd
work might
call
not
it...
be easy. He's not going to fail you.
That's where I'm saying, well, define easy. Like, I don't want to be chasing around a blast-ended Scroot.
Yep.
I don't want to be running the risk of being caught on fire every time I go to class. Like, that's not relaxing to me.
You're still going to herbology, and herbology's gotten into some pretty aggressive plant life.
That's fair, but they at least seem to enjoy herbology because maybe they just feel like there's a purpose, more of a defined purpose. Like, Sprout seems like she's a little bit more put together.
Oh, I'll give you that. She's definitely a more seasoned teacher.
Yes.
For sure. Here's a great question for you.
All right.
More valuable to the trio going forward. We'll say from book 5 on, because this is when they made that switch. Herbology or care of magical creatures?
Which one do I think is more important for them?
Going forward, yes. The trio specifically. We're not talking about Neville.
Okay.
The trio specifically.
Neville.
This is probably going to be our poll, too, because I'm fascinated by this answer.
I mean, that is a really good... So now I'm trying to rack my brain of what has happened.
I'm springing this on you
I know, I have zero...
Just as we're talking.
Yeah. That's a difficult one, because definitely for book 5, I need to think more about book 6 and 7, and especially because we're not in the spoiler section. I'm not going to address.
Oh, do we have something we can debate in the spoiler section?
We should debate this in the
spoiler
spoiler
section. We'll hold the debate until the spoiler section.
All right, fair enough.
But what do you think about the letter from Hagrid and the whole situation?
No, I feel really bad for him. I'm with Harry on this. I think, and to what your point is of, well, they're not taking his class and he's having a really bad year. I feel like that's actually a good reason in favor of going down. You're not seeing him often. He is your friend. You should be supporting him. You've kind of already hurt him a bit this year because you're not taking his class. Like, he clearly he needs support right now. He wants to maintain the friendship. He's reaching out in a time of need. I think it's a little bit unempathetic of Hermione and Ron to so quickly dismiss that.
I agree completely. I think that's a great point you bring up of because you've shunned Hagrid so much, maybe you should make an extra effort.
Try to minimize the number of times that you're upsetting Hagrid.
I agree. Harry ultimately ends up deciding, oh, maybe I shouldn't. Okay, so the trio decide no on going to Hagrid's. Ron and Hermione are going to go off and do their apparition test, which we've already talked about. Harry's going to go to potions. So since so many of his class are going to take the apparition test, there's only 3 students in the potions class, which is awesome.
I used to love those days when I was in high school.
Because they usually showed a movie or something, or did like a fun game or something like that.
Or it was just quiet time and you could just work on whatever you wanted.
Oh, that'd be great too. But we're nerds that like to get our homework done before we even left for the day, and then just do whatever we want for the rest of the day.
That was why it was quality time.
Fair enough.
And then you finish early, and then you write a note to Elizabeth.
No. You don't write a note to Elizabeth. You two write novels, full-on novels. Note. Okay, sure. They implore Harry, since it'll be a more vacant class, like, hey, this might be your real opportunity. And then Harry's like, 57th time is the lucky time or whatever. And Ron's like, wait a second. That's it. We have a lucky potion. Use it. And then Hermione's like, actually, that is a fantastic idea. Can't believe I didn't think of that.
I love Hermione cutting in like, that's brilliant.
That's really, really smart. Yeah, and then Harry just drifts off. And he goes into his own mind space. And he was like, well, I was really hoping to use that for another situation. And here I am, like a schmuck, thinking, oh yeah, he's definitely saving that for like a fight with Death Eaters or a fight with Voldy. No, he's saving it to steal a moment with Ginny. And then have Ron approve of it later.
I think that's the funniest part.
Oh my gosh.
I also like how it says it's like half-formed ideas.
Yeah.
Just like sort of like float into his consciousness at like certain hours of the day. And I'm like, this is such a...
The adult in me is like, Harry, you're an idiot. If you're going to save it for an important death-defying moment. But the practical realist inside of me remembers what I was like at 16 and approaching a girl I really liked, even if it was a girl I knew really well. That's, in its own right, a terrifying experience. So you might want the extra help. So I'm like, I get it. I disagree with it, but I get it.
I'm with Harry on this. He's trying to, optimize his key days, or he's saving it for a rainy day when the moment's just right, which...
I'm not going to kill him for it.
I respect that.
Yeah, that's fine. So we get to the potions class, and the 3 students in this class are Harry, Ernie Macmillan, and one irritated Draco Malfoy that he even has to be here. And especially when he gets the assignment for the day, which is make something fun.
I love how vague that is.
It's incredibly vague, which Ernie Macmillan takes vaguely and then goes to make a vague potion, which doesn't turn out well, surprisingly.
No.
But Draco is quite upset that it's basically a wasted day and a wasted whatever this is, an hour, 2 hours.
To be fair, I would be too. Because this is the counter to what we were just talking about. Like, usually you go in on the days when everyone's on a field trip and no one else is there, and you get like, you get to watch a movie, or you get to work on your homework, or you get to, do whatever, something fun. But there's nothing worse than going into a class and having it be a day that you're like, oh, I'm gonna like finally get a moment to like catch up on something or work ahead or do whatever, and they're like, well, we're gonna do this like really asinine thing.
let's group read. Everybody gets a paragraph, and we're going to knock out a chapter or something like
this
that.
Isn't furthering anything. You can't actually do anything because 90% of the class is gone. This is 100% a throwaway thing. I'm with Draco on this. I would be so annoyed.
I would probably also be annoyed. However, I mean, it's potions class. I mean, it'd be cool to make up a cool, crazy, different potion.
You're just saying that because you're not in wizarding school. I bet it loses its luster when you're on, like, year 6.
You're not wrong. That is probably very accurate. Harry does make an observation about Draco, other than being annoyed. He notes that Draco is looking thinner, more pale. There's not an air of smugness or superiority about him.
Which I like that that's what Harry notices.
Yeah, the smug, lack of smug. He's not smug today.
He's not smug. There's something going on.
He does note that this gives him joy because he knows whatever Draco is working on that he can't figure out, it must be going poorly. And he takes delight in another's failure, so that's always good. Harry decides to make a euphoria potion. I already mentioned Ernie's disaster. And Draco ends up making a passable hiccuping potion.
Why did he pick that?
It's probably easy. He didn't have to, like, think terribly hard about it.
Fair.
I would imagine.
Because it's like Harry's makes sense. Ernie's makes sense. Draco's is like, why? Did he have...
You don't think it's kooky enough? You don't think it's like, ooh, fun?
How does that... Yeah, like, where does that fall into fun?
Do you think year 1 Draco would make this potion to be like, haha, gotcha? Slip it into, like, someone's pumpkin juice in the morning?
I thought it was to stop hiccuping.
No, I took it as cause hiccuping.
As cause hiccuping? Okay, that would make it more fun. That actually I could kind of see.
Oh, you thought it was a solution to
stop
hiccuping.
And I'm like, why?
No,
like,
that's a very practical potion.
Right. I'm like, that's not inherently fun. Also super random. Also, like, did he have the hiccups in class? Like, is that why he made the potion? I had so many questions about it. But giving someone hiccups, I think, would make way more sense.
It tracks more with what I think Draco was trying to do. And maybe he has made it before in the past, and he's like, okay, I don't have to think about this, I can just do it.
Hey, Draco, what's your version of fun? Not having the hiccups.
So, Harry's motivation for doing the Euphoria potion was to hopefully put Slughorn in such a great mood that he would just offer up the memory. So much so that after Slughorn, passes by and gives him the usual, wow, that's great, oh, you're just like your mother, this is amazing, blah, 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 but then goes about his business and then goes to pick up everything and leave, Harry literally asks Slughorn to taste the potion. Dumbledore literally said this is more than just if Dumbledore couldn't slip him a potion.
Yep.
Asking him bluntly, this is not one of Harry's finer moments. I get he's in a rushed panic at this point, but not your best effort.
Harry's not a master of subtlety.
No. Which, I can't wait until we get to it in a future chapter, but we do get a actual master of subtle hints and wants a little later. But,
yes.
So this is obviously a failed attempt at the memory, another one. So that leaves Harry one option. He must try the Felix Felicis. And he gets together, make sure they're alone in the boys' dormitory. Just him, Ron, and Hermione. No Dean, no Seamus, no Neville. And he only takes a couple of mouths. This I think is wise. He only takes a couple, like a mouthful or a small quantity.
Yep.
And leaves the majority of it behind. Because he's like, I just need it for like an hour or two. This shouldn't take very long.
And then this way, if he needs it to work up his courage to talk to a certain Gryffindor girl, he'll have something. And
I love how they have a plan set up. They're like, hey, he's going to be a little bit late from the dinner, and then he's going to walk to his office, his classroom, all of that good stuff. So that's when you can kind of ambush him on his way, and we got it. We got this. Then Harry takes it. And he notes a feeling of exhilarating sense of infinite opportunity. He could do literally anything he even imagined.
Can I jump in real quick
with
this? Because every time I read this, it makes me think of the quote from Perks of Being a Wallflower, where it's like in that moment we were infinite.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And my brain has always tied them together.
This is gonna start, literally this description and the rest of this chapter just makes me think of the movie.
Yes, 100%. All I can hear in my head when I read it is the movie.
Which, again, if you pay attention to our intro, we have bits of this chapter in the intro, and it's, Daniel Radcliffe going, excellent, really excellent. It just sticks in my head. I have many, many issues with the sixth movie. They did this scene, I think, fairly well. Like this whole sequence.
Yeah. The part where he goes, I feel like it's the place to be tonight.
Yeah.
I love that.
And I get, again, reading the actual words in the book, I get where they made choices on actors and how they wanted to portray things.
Yeah.
I get it. So, the place to be tonight, as Jen said, is Hagrid's hut. That's where he wants to go. I'm going down to Hagrid's. I feel like it's the place to be tonight. And predictably, Ron and Hermione are like, oh, what? We literally just had the plan laid out. Yeah. It's pretty solid. It's foolproof. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And he's certain about it. He's confident about it. He's a little oddly positive about it. He's on a different plane of existence right now. Yeah, he's clearly on something, but at least they know what he's on.
Yeah, and it's all in a positive way.
Yeah.
But he's not 100% in his thoughts right now.
And Hermione ends up going, I guess this is the potion, so we just gotta let him go with it, I guess?
I like Hermione's reluctance to...
Yeah, she's not happy about it.
No. To be fair, though, from her perspective, if I'm talking to you and you're being rational and we're on the same page, and then all of a sudden you, flip completely, I would be a little bit concerned. Even if I know it's from the potion, it's still disconcerting.
And you told me to do something very specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I agreed to do it that way.
Yes.
And then I immediately change.
Yep. Yeah, I'd be a little bit concerned too.
Mm-hmm. So he takes off for Hagrid's instead of going to track down Slughorn. And in the process of leaving the Gryffindor common room, he happens to brush against Ginny, who then turns around and snaps at Dean for pushing her through the door. I can get through myself. I've told you a number of times, I think she also includes.
How many times has Dean been trying to push her through the portal? It's funny because, it does play into Ginny's character. She's very independent, and she's fairly strong-willed, and she clearly doesn't, hesitate to express her feelings for things. But it's just interesting to me that, that's a problem.
It's a big trigger for her, apparently.
I'm with her on that. I'm just not understanding from Dean's perspective, how many times has he done it after she's told him to stop doing it? That's what I don't understand. Because I can see after a while, if, you're repeatedly getting, pushed with something that you've expressed, don't do it, you're going to have a stronger reaction each time.
The only thing I could say in Dean's defense here is technically he didn't do it here.
That's true.
So I'm assuming he did learn that lesson and stopped.
That's fair.
At some point.
I guess, but it sounds like she's had to tell him multiple times before.
She's a very fiery personality.
Yes.
She can respond to things aggressively sometimes. Yes. So I don't know if she had a bad Quidditch practice.
Yep. Or
maybe she got a bad test grade.
Yeah.
Maybe just wasn't having a great day and just got a little snappy. Yeah. Or Harry brushed up against her while under the influence of a potion, and things just happened to go the right way.
I thought it was kind of sweet that, the Felix potion still gave him a little bit of a bump in the right direction with Ginny, even though that wasn't necessarily, what he wanted it to be.
I like the potion is, all we can handle right now is just a slight brushing while you're invisible.
Yep.
I can't help you out talking to her. I'm not even that positive.
And it was also being a bro to Ron, because when the three of them walked out of the boys' dormitory, Harry wasn't with... You couldn't see Harry because he was under the invisibility cloak, and then that caused Lavender to have a very strong reaction.
Yeah, what are you doing with her in the boys' dormitory? Which, I'll give you long-term, that might help out Ron. Short-term, that is not helping Ron at all.
Short-term, not at all. But this is all... Felix is the long con.
Fair enough.
Also, I'm still on Lavender's side for that one because if I saw my still not yet quite ex-boyfriend coming out of a room with the girl that I was nervous about after having many talks with him about being nervous about said girl.
Amongst other issues,
I can't say I'd be thrilled.
Probably wouldn't blame you. Harry ends up still under the invisibility cloak, deciding, you know what would be really, really nice? A walk past the vegetable patch. I could really just, it's a little out of my way, but I could just do with a walk past that. And just completely on a whim, turns a corner and spots Slughorn talking to Professor Sprout.
What are the odds?
What are those odds? What are the odds of Filch also not locking the front door? Those are long odds.
Those are long odds. That was...
Seeing two professors talking to each other, that's doable. But Filch forgetting to lock.
Okay, so I have a question about this, because this was the part that kind of threw me a little bit. So I understand the, okay, he's leaving the dorm room and it's just this thing that isn't how it seems to Lavender, and then he's leaving the portal and it's this thing that isn't how it seems to Ginny. But those aren't things that are
in his sphere of control.
Well, so they sort of are, right? He's doing a thing and it's causing a reaction. I know that it makes you lucky. What's the mechanism for making Filch forget to lock the door?
I know what you're trying to ask.
Right. It's not coming out right, but...
Yeah, I know where you're getting at.
Yeah.
And I think it might be the circumstance where maybe he was locking the doors, he just did that one last. Or he got distracted by Peeves randomly. And that's kind of the,
okay,
luck of it.
Okay.
Is it should have happened. There's no reason why it shouldn't have happened, except for some random circumstance.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the luck comes in. And this is also where I think you can start getting addicted to this stuff, is oh, that worked out perfectly well.
Yeah.
That feeling can be horribly addicting, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But
it's funny because if it had been framed in a way where it said, Filch had locked the door but the lock was broken, that would almost make more sense in my mind than saying Filch forgot to lock the door.
Because you're almost putting it as the potion is now affecting Filch's actions.
Right. And that's the part where I'm not quite
connecting
there.
that dot?
Yeah, I'm not there with that as an
I
explanation.
Get you. I think when Slughorn first describes Felix Felicis, he's everything just happens to go your way. Somehow, some way. And then,
yeah.
I guess, to further your point, what happens when there are multiple people in the same vicinity under the influence of that potion?
Right.
How do they... I guess my answer to that, off the top of my head, is no magic is necessarily perfect.
Yeah.
And there can be downsides to everything. But, I don't know. Regardless, clearly Filch wasn't on this potion either. So Harry fully lucks out. He does end up talking with Slughorn and convinces him to go down to the burial tonight for Aragog. It's some nifty wording, and clearly Felix is helping Harry out here. And Harry talks about that, how, Felix was just guiding me a certain way. Oh, I should take an extra breath pause here and whatever. And he convinces Slughorn on the basis of, acromantulas aren't too common. And then Slughorn just does all the work himself of oh, you know what? Maybe I can actually get a little bit of this, or maybe I can, whatever. He just nudges Slughorn, and then it's just a cascading effect that Slughorn just does himself, which is great. So Slughorn goes to prepare himself for the funeral, I guess. Wears something a little bit more appropriate. Whereas Harry ends up going straight to Hagrid's and meets Hagrid. Tries to console him as best he can, using what I view as some robotic statements. I read them as fairly robotic.
Okay.
But apparently they did the job, as he pats Hagrid on the elbow, because that's all he could reach. And Hagrid does say something a little bit interesting, though. He says there are parts of the forest now that even he can't go. And that's never happened before.
Yep.
And you assume the centaurs are not a big fan of him. You assume now the acromantula. What am I going to use? Children?
Yeah.
The spawn.
I guess. Offspring, yeah.
Yeah.
Spawn works.
Any of those words are not a fan of him.
No.
It literally took everything he had to get Aragog out without being eaten by a horde of these spiders.
Yeah.
Which maybe it's better Ron didn't hear that story.
I think so.
So maybe it worked out. Slughorn eventually joins them and seemingly secures a vial or two of some very precious acromantula venom. And then, since Hagrid is just a mess, I mean, he's in rough shape over this.
Yeah.
Which, understandably, I mean, it's your oldest friend.
Yeah.
Even though it's a spider, it was a talking spider, so I mean, there was that.
And he grew up with him.
Yeah. So Slughorn is the one that ends up saying the eulogy, for lack of a better word, and it's really well done for off the top of his head.
It's almost perfect. I mean, it's very empathetic.
Even though Dumbledore mentions it specifically, I think we lose track of the fact that Slughorn is just generally a very intelligent being.
He is.
Like, he's not a dumb guy. He knows how to articulate words in a very eloquent manner. And I'll read it here for you. Farewell, Aragog, king of arachnids, whose long and faithful friendship those who knew you won't forget. Though your body will decay, your spirit lingers on in the quiet, web-spun places of your forest home. May your many-eyed descendants ever flourish, and your human friends find solace for the loss they have sustained. That was beautiful.
That
was really well done. You're
very
giving a
sweet.
eulogy for a giant spider.
Yeah.
I don't think I could have done any better.
No.
I mean, that is fantastic. So props to Slughorn for the fantastic eulogy. And after which, well, they got to pick Hagrid up off the ground, because after that, he was like, I'm done.
That poor guy.
I'm over it. And he's just, literal puddles are just falling. They retreat back to Hagrid's for some drinks. And this is where the chapter gets even more interesting. Slughorn makes very clear, I've had all of these bottles tested for poison. Rest assured. I love that we're at the stage of the Harry Potter wizarding world where you have to ensure that anything you drink is not poisoned.
Yep.
However, he does this by having house elves taste test all of the wines and meads.
It's not great.
That is, as much props as I just gave to Slughorn, that is still... There are a lot of positives about Horace Slughorn. There are still some personality quirks that are not as great.
Yeah, this is kind of a big one.
What happens if one of them died? What happens if one of them did get poisoned? Do they just put that under the carpet? Or, how does that work?
Oh, that's so sad.
Seriously, is it like, oh, Albus, my bad, I accidentally killed one of your house elves. They drank more poison. Here's another poison bottle. How does that work if one of this goes poorly? I don't know.
I'm hoping that it's more so that they wouldn't react the same to a poison, or that it would have a slower effect or less of an effect, and maybe the house elf would just get a little food poisoning instead of dying.
You have a very optimistic point of view on this.
Yes.
Fair enough.
That's my headcanon.
Yeah, not the greatest move by Slughorn, and Harry probably correctly assumes that Hermione should not hear about this particular fact.
Wise decision.
That's a wise decision. That would cause a lot of drama. But Harry notices that the wines and meads and drink of the evening are rapidly decreasing in volume, so he decides he needs to keep this going. He has to keep the drinking flowing so that Slughorn might be a little bit more receptive to giving up the memory. So he successfully pulls off the refilling charm silently for the first time ever. He wasn't able to do it, but Felix told him, hey, you should give it a shot this time. Okay. He's so successful in the refilling charm that Hagrid had 14 buckets of wine. Jenn, I'd die. I would be dead.
Yeah.
And I'm a big guy.
Yes. I don't know what his tolerance is like.
We're not even talking glasses of wine.
No, it says buckets.
Buckets.
I feel pretty good after like 2 beers.
I think that's alcohol poisoning. I think I would die.
That's 100% alcohol
Yeah.
poisoning. I don't think you'd make it anywhere close to 14 buckets.
Probably not. Nope. But let's be real. I probably wouldn't make it past 1. I don't know how big the buckets are per se.
It's almost a glass, or it's almost a bottle. Because when Slughorn was first pouring them out to like fill it, Harry said that he almost emptied the first wine bottle into Hagrid's
So you're telling
bucket.
me Hagrid has had roughly, I'll be generous here, 12 bottles of wine by himself?
Yes.
We're just
Easily
assuming
be
this
dead.
is just like, let's just assume it's a mild wine.
Right.
Not like an aggressively alcoholic
Right.
wine. Or a particularly potent ear. Who knows? They're both drunk. Let's just put it out there. They have had their fill and they are now a little loopy. And they're singing songs and retelling stories, and Harry's just sitting there nodding, pretending to drink. Can you imagine if Harry had tried to keep up? My goodness.
It was very smart that Felix told him, you need to be sober.
Yeah. I did not realize this meme / t-shirt originated here. Hagrid goes, a salute to Harry Potter. Cheers to Harry Potter.
Okay.
And Slughorn goes, yes, to Perry Otter. And I don't know who has seen these memes and t-shirts of literally an otter with the Harry Potter glasses and just says Perry Otter on it. Let us comment on our Twitter and Instagram if you've actually seen these memes and t-shirts. I've seen them in a lot of different places. But Perry Otter, this chapter, this saying, that's where that comes from.
Wow.
Yeah. I was mind blown. I was like, oh my gosh, this is where that comes from. This is the benefit of reading this again. I haven't read this book in a long time, and here you have it. But he sings a very melancholy tune. Hagrid passes out, which is an accomplishment. I actually feel like it's a heck of an accomplishment for Slughorn to out-drink Hagrid, or at least outlast him.
He definitely outlasted him. I would say that's a fair accomplishment.
That is saying a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, not even just he's a half giant.
So Slughorn knows how to pace himself better.
Apparently, because I don't think Slughorn, as rotund as he is,
Right.
he can't do 14 buckets. After Hagrid passes out, and it's just Harry and Slughorn left, this takes a turn. So literally they're singing songs and ballads and all this fun, jovial stuff, and then all of a sudden Hagrid passes out, and this takes a very different turn. This is a little bit darker, a little bit more sobering turn.
Yes.
And Harry recounts the death of his parents.
Yeah, that's...
In quite astonishing detail.
Yeah.
Which I think would disturb anybody, but particularly Slughorn, who has... he had a relationship with James because he taught James, but he particularly was fond of Lily.
Yeah.
And he's quite rightfully disturbed by what he hears. Harry really ratchets it up a whole other notch when he's like, well, if you want to help Lily's memory, if you want to help her son, by the way, I'm the chosen one. Be brave like my mother, Professor, which I think is just a great line.
That's a great appeal.
It's a great appeal. It's a great emotional punch. It's a wonderful line. And Slughorn, shockingly, gives up the memory. That gets him. The emotional appeal for Lily gets him. And plus the chosen one. He's like... Because Slughorn's like, even in his drunk state, he's like, well, what good would it do?
Yeah.
Like, what good would giving you the memory actually do? And he's like, this is information I need to destroy him.
Yeah. It's a very good personal appeal.
Yeah. It's a really solid pitch. Good job, Felix.
Yeah, Felix nailed it.
I don't think Harry himself would have been able to pull this charade off a little bit.
Don't think so.
Or at least, he might even try this tactic. He won't do it as tastefully.
I think Felix helps him be patient.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that Harry is a very patient person. So I think part of what Felix is doing is he knows he can trust Felix to tell him when to do it, so he's letting the moment come to him instead of trying to make the moment happen.
I get that vibe of, like, telling him a detail and then letting it sit with Slughorn.
And that's what I don't think Harry has historically been good at. I think Harry's a lot more like, okay, it's this and this and this and this.
Let's get to the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he ends up getting the memory, and then that's where we leave this chapter. Any other comments, thoughts about the non-spoilers for the chapter?
No, I really enjoyed this. I thought it was interesting to see Slughorn slowly come to terms with giving Harry the memory. I'm happy that he did. Yay, Slytherins. But it was very humanizing, I think, to see him struggle with it. Because I think obviously the right call in this is to give up the memory and help the right cause, but you definitely, not everyone is as headstrong as Harry, and I think that shows with Slughorn. But it's nice to see him do the right thing. And then I just feel bad for Hagrid.
Yeah, I think this chapter is more of a I feel bad for Hagrid, and then when I think of this chapter, I always think back to the movie. I just do. The pincers scene is particularly fantastic.
I couldn't stop thinking of that.
Some of Daniel Radcliffe's best acting right there.
I also like how this is this chapter is full of just like whiplash, because you have the whiplash in the beginning of it.
It's true.
And then you've got whiplash at the end where, they're singing songs and they're drunk and everyone's kind of in a good mood, and then Harry's like, let me tell you about how my parents had died. And you're like, whoa. Yeah. I also thought it was really cute, though, to see Hagrid and Slughorn get drunk and, like, bond together. And, like,
It was nice to see Hagrid be like, wait, Slughorn cares that much? Like, I've never really interacted with him. That is amazing that he cares so much. We will wrap it up here for the non-spoilers. We don't have a ton to discuss in the spoiler section, so it might be a little bit abbreviated, but fret not, we will get to our herbology versus magical creatures in the spoiler section. We'll be right back. Before we get to our break sound, I'd like to acknowledge our friend Andy, who helps us produce our intros and our break sounds. If you want to hear more of Andy's work and like Formula One racing, check out the Outlap F1 podcast. It's your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. You can find them wherever you listen to podcasts, and they even have a YouTube page. So check out Andy, Cody, John, James, and Deanna, and join them on the Outlap.
Where is he? Where's my 1-1?
All right, so we are back with the spoiler section of Chapter 22, After the Burial. And one of the surprise debates I think we had from the non-spoiler was the herbology versus care of magical creatures going forward from the end of Book 5, for the trio specifically. And the reason I brought it up was because we were talking about how care of magical creatures might not be the most necessary class for them to take. And I'm like, well, isn't herbology, like, that's just specifically plants. Could be useful. I mean, there's potions that you can come up with that need those ingredients. There's, obviously we saw the mandrakes in year 2 be a real big important plot point. So I'm not saying that herbology is a throwaway subject by any means. And you get into the later years here in 6 and 7 where now you're not just getting your routine plants, you're not just getting your routine creatures either. You're starting to get into more threatening or more important types of species. I will turn it over to you, Jen, for your points as to where you want to go with it.
So I'm trying to think through what would be overall more helpful, because since we've put this on Book 5 and forward.
Mm-hmm. When they had to make the decision of what classes am I taking.
Right. So definitely in Book 5, care of magical creatures I feel was more important than herbology, because they ended up using the Thestrals to get to the Ministry of Magic.
Okay.
And they did that having learned information about the Thestrals from care of magical creatures. So I feel like that's a point in favor of that. On the other hand, I feel like in Book 7, if you're camping, it's a lot better to know plants than it would be to know animals. Now, granted, they do come across a dragon later on, but I feel like that's maybe not like the rule for encounters.
You can't plan on encountering a dragon that you're
Right.
going to have to maneuver around.
Right. But if you're camping for 6 months or however long they ended up camping, I feel like it would be helpful to know plants in terms of eating or magical properties or being able to cultivate a garden in
Healing,
your
stuff
tent,
like that. Yeah.
healing, things like that. So we're tied 1-to-1, and then I'm trying to figure out which one would be more helpful for this book. And I'm kind of leaning herbology, but in the most indirect way possible. Because for this book, potions play a fairly large role. And I feel like herbology and potions kind of go hand in hand. Because you have to understand the magical properties of plants if you're adding them to a potion. Granted, you add other things to potions as well. It's not just plants. But I feel like that might tie in a little bit more with that than Care of Magical Creatures.
Fair enough. I definitely agree that the tie into potions is probably the most potent connection you can make going forward.
Yeah.
Like you said, there's other ingredients. Some of those do come from living beings, creatures. So there's that. And while I agree with you that in the camping scenario, plants are probably more important to be aware of, creatures would also be important in that scenario as well. And then obviously the dragon comes into play. I'm trying to fight my bias of wanting Care of Magical Creatures to be at least included. Mm-hmm. Maybe not over herbology, but it should just be included. This will end up being the poll for us on the episode, and we really want to hear your thoughts as to what the most beneficial for the trio going forward after Book 5, Herbology or Care of Magical Creatures. I think I'm still in the boat of Care of Magical Creatures.
Okay. I'm still in herbology.
You're still in the herbology. Okay. Did you have anything else for the spoiler section?
I did not.
I'm just really happy you mentioned the pincers at the beginning, or at the end of this non-spoiler.
We can't talk about this chapter and not mention the Pierce.
Daniel Radcliffe just nailed it.
That whole section of the movie is just my favorite. I want to go rewatch it now.
Yeah, I am getting that vibe as I read this book of wanting, and again, for those that have forgotten, it is my least favorite movie.
Why is that?
The ending. It's the ending. They don't have the massive battle at Hogwarts when the Death Eaters actually come in to the school and Bill gets scarred in the battle and a lot of things happen, and I would love to see. I'm a big fan of action, so I love when battles happen, and I want to see them played out, and I want to stick with them. And I get we have to be in Harry's point of view, so like even the Battle of Hogwarts in 7, we only see fragments of it. We don't even see the full battle, which I just want to see the battle. But that was number one, and then the number two thing was I remember sitting in the movie theater, and I do remember I got this memory on Facebook recently because we are in the month of July recording this, and that's when the movie came out. So I got a memory on Facebook of Julie and I went to go see that movie on opening night.
Really?
Yep. That is, I can now confirm Julie and I saw that movie together on opening night. And I remember sitting, watching the movie, going, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. Oh, no, they're going to do it. They got to do it. They have to do it. Nope, they're not going to do it. They didn't have Dumbledore's funeral.
Yeah.
Which is blasphemy. I mean, why do you cut that? Not even film it. I don't know if they cut it or not. But you have to have Dumbledore's funeral. I mean, come on.
I'm with you on that. I think that should have been
a major character. Like a major character.
There's a lot less of a sense of finality, to it. Because I think one of the things that the books do, or that this book does really well, and is the only part of this book I actually don't enjoy, is that it ends on such a downer. Because it's this sense of like, okay, it's real. They're on their own. What are they going to do now? And then it ends, and you're like, ooh, wow.
It's just one of those weird moments where, reading the book again, some of the stuff they did include in the movie is in the books. Like, a lot of the relationship drama is actually in the books. But I'm like, you're having relationship drama between teenagers be more important than an epic battle that ends up scarring one of the Weasleys and solidifies the relationship between him and Fleur, by the way.
Yeah.
And starts having Fleur be more of a member of the Weasley family, because how she responds to Bill's affliction now endears her to the entire Weasley family.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of the Harry Ginny stuff really ramping up towards that end of it.
Well, Harry and Ginny in the movies.
Well, oh, and there's another thing, but continue on.
Versus the books.
Well, yeah.
Are two completely different relationships.
That me just saying that sparked a whole new memory that I tried to block out of my whole being. But now I remember it, and now I have to say it. They not only took out the battle, and they not only took out the funeral, they added a whole other scene that never takes place.
Oh, I forgot.
You also blocked it out of your memory.
Yes.
Because you should, because it never happens.
I'm not arguing with you on that.
They burned down the burrow.
That's dumb.
That's the first real Ginny-Harry interaction, is because she, ties up his shoelaces in the most awkward scene ever.
Who does that? Who does that? With, they're in high school.
You never randomly went up to a guy and was like, let me flirt. Let me tie your shoes for you. It's such an awkward thing.
That is the most awkward.
It's such an awkward scene. Literally,
man.
Daniel Radcliffe going the pincers. Yeah, that thing is less awkward than that moment between
100%.
Harry and Ginny.
So I know that the producers said that they wanted to convey the feeling of vulnerability and that no one was safe, and that was why they burned down the burrow. It makes no sense in the story. It makes no sense in the movie. It makes no sense for any of the characters, because it's just kind of like, oh, they're just randomly at the burrow and it burns down, and oh, okay, then we're back at the school, and then it's never mentioned really in any sort
They're never rebuilding it. It's just the same as it was. And I get it's magic, but also if it's magic, they probably could just put out the fires immediately.
Right. Just all of it's dumb.
All of it's bad.
Yeah.
It's just bad. So you're giving me that.
Yeah.
Instead of prominent scenes that are actually in the book.
I can't argue with you on that. I still enjoy the movie, but I selectively.
There's
just no way to.
Me.
Yeah. I think the acting is the best in 6 for me. And I think that might also be why I enjoy it so much.
Even though it plays up the whole Lavender is the bad guy in the relationship.
Yeah.
I do love that actress's portrayal of Lavender. She's hilarious. She's really funny.
She's the
whole scene where she's breathing on the glass.
It's so cringy.
Gets me every time.
Yep.
Oh, it's so funny.
It is so cringy, but she does such a good job of doing it very seriously and just intensely.
Yeah. No, there are parts of the movie that I really, really love. Some good parts. My goodness. I just remember sitting there being like, they're not gonna do the battle or the funeral. And coming to grips with them not doing it. I was mad. Yeah. I was actually angry.
That's fair.
But anywho.
We should just never mention Harry and Ginny in the movies ever again. That was so not. I need one more minute to rant about this.
Go for it.
The thing that kills me the most is I think it's so well written in the books in one of the next couple chapters where they have the Quidditch game and Harry comes up afterwards and is it Ginny's got that burning look in her eye or whatever, and then they kiss and they whatever. It's I never felt the passion in the movies. They did not write Ginny well for the movies, because I feel in the book she sort of, and then towards the second or the last third of the books, she's almost a member of the trio. She's not quite, but she's hanging out with them, and she's relaxed and she's making jokes, and it's literally in the movies it's just oh yeah, that's Ginny, she's Harry's love interest. She tied his shoes.
She had him zip up her dress. Ooh. Yes.
Yeah.
I think part of the issue is I don't know that their chemistry was all that great.
The actors did not have a lot of
Not that chemistry. They didn't like each other. I'm sure they got along famously. I'm sure they were really good friends. But their chemistry just never seemed like the characters liked each other.
I just wonder to what extent that was their acting, or it was just that they weren't given opportunities to make it. Because the only reason I say that is because I believe that the producer of the last 2 films really shipped Harry and Hermione.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if that was also kind of done on his part to minimize them.
The only one with inside knowledge at that point about how the series was going to end or anything regarding book 7 was Alan Rickman. He was the only one clued in to how this might all end.
Yeah.
And the larger story of their character. So I could see how some of those might hinder plot lines. Let me throw this at you. Like, I know later in the movies, it got a little awkward because Rupert Grint would have to kiss Emma Watson. And you had that scene in the 7th movie where Daniel Radcliffe's actually kissing Emma Watson.
Yeah.
In, like, the
when,
smoke of the Horcrux.
Right.
Which makes sense for that context.
Yeah.
But in general, you had to still film that. And it's awkward because they had been friends for so long.
Yeah.
And with Ginny, it might be awkward because she was even younger than them and growing up together, and now you and Bonnie Wright are now having to, like, flirt and interact, and you might have been friends, or you might still think of her as, like, a child because that's how you first met.
Right.
I don't know. I'm just putting things on it.
But here's my only counterpoint to that. Okay? If you're trying to flirt to impress a girl, can you really flirt by tying her shoelaces?
I would like to say yes, but no.
So it's like, I completely agree with what you're saying, 100%, and I'm absolutely certain that that's a factor in all of this. I think some of it is also just, they did not give them a good...
Maybe, well... That scene, I think, is atrocious for a number of reasons. I don't think there's any salvaging that scene.
That and the zipping up her dress, like, they're
That's
just
better than
robots.
the shoelaces, but still, it's not great, but it's
not
better than the shoelace thing.
So we have 2 scenes to convey that these characters are, like, really intensely into each other. Mm-hmm. Let's have one of them tie the shoes of the other one, and then let's have the guy zip up her...
Honestly, the best
dress.
part of the dress scene was... George.
That's why it was yes, absolutely.
The best part of that scene was George.
But also, like, just why? Well, what were they thinking, Dan? It doesn't even make sense.
Here's my best effort to put a romantic spin on this.
Please do.
All right? Stay with me. Okay? She notices his shoelaces untied. Mm-hmm. So she goes down to tie the shoe. Mm-hmm. And when she comes up from that, they're now very, very close. They're now, like, face to face. Mm-hmm. And there's a hint of a shadow of this could be a kiss. Okay.
Can I counterpoint that?
Sure. Okay. I don't know that I would call mine a point.
Okay, that's fair enough. So maybe guys, maybe I just have terrible flirting techniques. Maybe this is just, like, I just don't understand it because I'm not a good flirt or something like that. But I feel like, so if I'm trying to flirt with someone and I'm, like, tying their shoe, maybe I just have too much personal space. But, like, I'm not coming, like, up. Like, I'm not coming, like, straight up.
You're right. I will give you that. Because in real life, not in the movie, you're nailing them in the chin or the nose.
Right, it's just, it's too awkward to just go from, like, okay, I'm tying your shoe on the floor to I'm just standing nose to nose with you.
Yeah. That's the best I could give you as far as potential intent.
I could, and sadly, I could actually see them thinking
that's the best I got for you. That's my only... Even, like... I seem to remember even how they had their first kiss in the movie was rough.
I think I blocked it out. What was their first kiss?
It was in the Room of Requirement. She helps him put the advanced potion making book away. But she does it, which is a whole other set of problems because she puts the book away. She has him close his eyes. She goes to put the book away and then comes back, and before he opens his eyes, she, like, gives him a kiss. The problem with that scene is that's not how that happens. He goes in and puts the book away, and that's how he remembers where the diadem is.
Oh, you're right. That's kind of a major plot point.
Yes. So that was an issue there. Once we really do, one, we need to finish this book. Number two, we need to rewatch the movie.
Yeah.
And pick some holes in it and be like, oh man, this is off. Because then I was like, how are they going to retcon that in the 7th movie? Because now they've set a thing, and then they retconned it by him sensing the Horcrux. He could feel or hear the Horcrux in his head.
Which is funny because it's just sometimes the movie choices that they make. I know we've just gone on a tangent about the movies.
Yes,
Whatever.
that's essentially what the spoiler section is turned into, but that's fine.
I know that sometimes they make decisions for the movies because there are impracticalities to filming things 100%, or certain things from books don't translate into movies, so they have to make changes in order to make it more audience friendly.
Sure.
Because you can intuit more things from like seeing it than you can reading it, right? Like a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Right.
You can convey things in a different manner. So I completely understand all of that. That being said, that wasn't necessary for this. Like, they took a plot point and then they twisted it, and then they had to make additional reasons to explain something when it never actually had to be changed in the first place. So,
Yes.
like, that's the thing that confuses me when producers and directors make those kinds of decisions. Like, I get, it's impractical to build, a set for this, or it's impractical to film something in a specific way. Like, okay, I'll give you that. But it doesn't make sense when it's something so small and so simple, yet actually something that did have meaning that needed to be addressed later on.
Maybe, and I might be getting my timeline wrong, but maybe Book 7, they weren't aware of the diadem being a Horcrux or something important, so they felt like, oh, this might be something we can twist or make a little bit more malleable so we can form it how we might want to tell that story. Mm-hmm. Not realizing like, oh, that's gonna be a mistake later that now we have to fix.
Wouldn't JK have said something?
You would think, because she consulted. She was there.
And she's notoriously strict with
Yep.
decision making.
You'd think something as big as a Horcrux would, kind of be important to mention.
A little bit.
But you know what we're going to mention on the next chapter? Horcruxes,
Oh
Jen.
boy. Smooth transition.
Thank you. We will wrap up the podcast here for chapter 22 after the burial. Jen will be back with us next week to discuss Horcruxes. So, with that, we will wrap it up. Thank you guys for listening. As always, you can give us a 5-star review on Spotify, leave a comment, a like, or share any of our posts on Twitter and Instagram at HogwartsAPod, and we will try to interact as best we can. You can also leave a comment on Spotify, and we will shout you out here on the podcast. Also, we have a brand new YouTube channel that is up. Please give that a look if you're frequent visitors to YouTube. All you got to do is the same thing, at HogwartsAPod, and you can find us. Again, we just started that. It's brand new, so any support there is very welcome. So thank you guys for listening, and we will see you again for next week, Chapter 23. Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at HogwartsAPod.